There are certain phrases that I hear all the time, like actions speak louder than words, birds of a feather flock together, you're an idiot, and the Sega Dreamcast prematurely died years ago. Hey, we've all said that last one at least once, but if the Dreamcast is so dead, then what do you call this?
When the rhythm starts to play, dance with me, make me sway.
With how many people still play and love the Dreamcast, it doesn't seem very dead to me. That's the thing about cheating death. Find a way to live forever and you'll never die. I figure my YouTube videos will last longer than I will. The world won't remember my tender last moments with my grandma as much as it'll remember this. Not sure how I feel about that, but you gotta give the Dreamcast a lot of credit for having so many games that people still love to play. I mean, just think about how many things have come into existence since the Dreamcast's supposed death that people care far less about. For example, my adult face. Alright, so here's the deal. When it comes to video games, typically the way things work is that the longer a console is on the market, the more good games there are. Talk to the PS2. However, the longer a console is on the market also usually means the more bad games there are. Talk to the PS2 again, which, to be fair, bad games can just be ignored. But with the Dreamcast's short time on the market, it didn't amass a pile of bad games, and yet still had an ample supply of bangers. I've seen the joke made before that the good games for the Dreamcast are all the games. Matter of fact, I've seen myself make that joke before. And while upon closer inspection, you'll inevitably find games like Dragon Riders Chronicles of Pern, not exactly a universally loved game, the point remains that the Dreamcast did a pretty good job of maintaining a high ratio of good games to games available. So by no means are the games I'll be talking about in this video the only games that'll always be fun, or even necessarily my top 5. It's just a handful of games I'd like to highlight at this time. So with that, the first game I'd like to talk about is Confidential Mission. While the Dreamcast is more well known for the excellent House of the Dead 2 when it comes to light gun games, I wanted to talk about Confidential Mission because not as many people do, but I don't talk about things just because nobody else does. Acorn Archimedes fans can feel that one. Confidential Mission is a really fun game. The concept of a light gun game tends to naturally lend itself to fun, but this game was made by one of Sega's best dev teams, known as Hitmaker at the time, and bravo to them for living up to such a name. Labeling yourself as something doesn't always make it true. But because the game was made by one of Sega's best teams, the foundation of the game is solid, and unsurprisingly, the Dreamcast received a very nice port. It's goofy but fun, cheesy, ridiculous enemies and trash talk, awkward dialogue, exactly what you want out of a light gun game. And not only that, but the reason I always feel compelled to recommend this game is because when people decide to invest in a light zapper, often to play House of the Dead 2 on the system, they're looking for an additional reason to make that investment worth it. And I'm here to tell you that Confidential Mission is that reason. Trust me, trying to show it off to your in-laws ain't it. For the next game, we've got Tech Romancer, which at first you might think sounds like some sort of odd romance novel between mechs or something, but nope, these mechs aren't in love with each other here. They want to fight each other, although I suppose people in love do like to fight each other. Why do people do that? Give your sweetie pie some sugar. In any case, you will be in love with the mechs as they are a lot of fun to play with. What makes this game great is that you can button mash if you want to, or you can take the game more seriously and learn all the different moves and form more solid strategies. Kind of like life. Know anybody who button mashes their way through life? Yeah, we all know someone. But however you play it, the game is a spectacle, giving off heavy arcade vibes, which makes sense given it is an arcade game, and just instantly makes my hands feel like I've been eating greasy pizza at a Chuck E. Cheese, but without the grease. Without the pizza too, though, that's kind of sad. There's a lot of mech fighting games out there, but this one has always felt special to me. Being made by Capcom certainly helps, and I think the people who actually bother to give this game a chance will continue to have fun with it for years and years to come. Alright, so at this point we've talked about a lot of different arcade games, something the Dreamcast is celebrated for, often thought of as the last great console that emphasized arcade ports as a main selling point. With that in mind, it's pretty hard to not talk about the Marvel vs. Capcom series. The second game is far more famous due to its massive roster, but I've always been more partial to the first game. I like the visual style a lot better. Going for mostly 2D, I prefer the button layout, which I'm using a Saturn controller via an adapter to play it, and I actually prefer the smaller roster since it feels more curated. In any match, I know I'm going to be getting the characters I care about the most, not this cactus thing. But that's just me. More people will probably prefer the sequel, which is also a ton of fun, but I thought I'd at least make the case for the first game, since people tend to just assume they should ignore it in favor of the second. A visual and auditory showcase, and a ton of fun to play. Moving along, we've got another arcade game, Dynamite Cop. I can't help myself but to talk about this game. It's so much fun. There aren't a lot of good 3D beat-em-ups out there, but this is definitely one of them. In fact, it might even be the best one. As was typical of many great Dreamcast games, it's goofy arcade fun that doesn't take itself overly serious. I tell you what though, there are a ton of different moves you can do in this game, to the point you'll need to look up how to do certain things. Oh, sorry, not a fan of reading? No problem, you don't have to. But the fact you can helps illustrate how much depth there is in a game that might be mistaken as not very deep. I love all the different items you can pick up and use as weapons too. Whether it's a bazooka or a baguette, anything can be used to get the job done. Quick little suggestion for you as well. Try intentionally failing some of the command prompt sequences. They're pretty fun to watch. Dynamite Cop is also a perfect game to play with a friend, which, by the way, every game I mention in this video is, and I just love recommending this game. People are always asking about it when I show footage too, so here you go. I figured I'd do my neighborhood a favor as well. Last but not least, we have Samba de Amigo. How could I not mention it? A game that people sleep on far too often for my liking. It's time to wake up and shake some maracas. Or rather, shake your wallet to death until all the dollar bills fall out. The maracas are a bit pricey, but luckily I can tell you that using a controller to play is perfectly enjoyable. I played this way for a long time before I got the maracas and still have no problem going back to this method. It's a fairly straightforward rhythm game where you try to time your inputs that ramps up in difficulty as you work through the game. The version of the game that I prefer is the Japanese Samba 2000 version, which adds more songs, but the regular version still has plenty of fun music on it. I find this is a great game to play with people who don't normally play video games too, due to how light-hearted it is. The music and visuals really carry the game to the point that it could be fun for someone to just watch you play, especially if you're using the maracas. It's just one of those games that makes you feel good. We could all use that, could we not? And that's why I think this game will be a game that will remain enjoyable forever. So there you have it, 5 Dreamcast games that I feel are a pretty surefire way to have a great time. But remember, these are certainly not the only ones for the system, which leads to the perfect opportunity for all of you to recommend the games you probably have on the tips of your tongues, most of which I'll probably agree with since I love the system's library, and a lot of them are on the tip of my tongue too. So with that, feel free to share your responses down below, along with anything else you'd like to say, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking talking about video games. He's the red bird, oh yes. And he hopes that you liked what he had to say.